Hey y'all, so I'm Polly. As most of you may know, I'm the founder of Black Women Photographers. I'm so excited about today's conversations with the one and only Jessy J. Not even a conversation, first of all, it's a whole workshop, a whole master class. I am so excited because how we met is I was actually commissioned to interview Jessy for Adobe like a year ago, 2 years ago now. And Jessy being Jessy decided to like be my unofficial mentor and like just like hero after the fact. Like you did not have to stay in touch with me at all, but for you to constantly just like
Great
pour
though.
into me and give me advice. And like whenever I text you, you're like, it's okay.
I don't mind.
I'm so grateful. And so, from writing an article to now doing a color grading workshop, this is going to be great because Jessy will take us through just her evolution of her work and her editing process. It is being recorded, so you can also just replay it. You don't have to write everything down right now. Don't worry. And we'll also have a surprise at the end. So make sure you stay tuned and listen. And I'll let Jessy take it from here.
Very exciting. Okay, ladies, thank you so much for joining again. I'm Jessy J. I've been doing beauty and swimwear and fashion photography for well over, it actually like went by so quickly. I swear I felt like I was telling people last year that I've only been shooting for 5 years. I think it's been like going on 10. I'm not even joking. Um, and I started off modeling. And, my dad, he was an artist and he influenced some of my work, but I actually took it upon myself once I got into the whole modeling game, once I was a little bit older, living on my own, to finally kind of dabble into photography. I was always influenced by the arts. I always have considered myself like, you know, appreciating artwork and whatnot, but I never thought I was actually going to become a photographer until much later. So I don't know, just it occurred to me that modeling is really what I need to be doing in life. It wasn't my passion. It was something that was just like, of course I was getting paid, but it felt like a fun hobby at the same time. So I ended up, you know, working like long hours, many jobs, side hustles, finally racked up enough cash, got my first camera. I actually jumped right into studio photography. So not only did I get a camera, but I got like 3 lights, I got stands, I got the full, like, the whole nine. So once I got all that stuff, I knew I had to commit to this and there was no turning back from there. Started testing on my friends, testing other models that I knew. And from there, I found that I actually do have something that I could bring to the table as far as like artistic work. I was working with a lot of male photographers. In my opinion, they have a different eye, especially with the type of photography that I was doing back in the day. I was doing more glamour stuff. And I was like, I need to, switch this up. So, ever since I started photography, I've been absolutely obsessed with it. And one of the things that I've always been equally obsessed with is color grading, retouching, and doing post-production stuff. Now, one of the things that I do want to touch on is kind of like a little bit of the evolution of how much like retouching has changed just over time in the time that I've been shooting. Um, you know, Man, it's totally different from the way it was 10 years ago, especially with the style photography that I'm doing. And I know we have a lot of people on the call that might not do glamour or fashion. You guys might do more editorial. You might not even shoot models. You might shoot kids and families and more headshots. I mean, I know it all varies, but in the style photography that I've been doing over the past 10 years, I've definitely seen a huge shift in retouching. And it is extremely important to understand that because it could become a make or break to whether you become a big photographer and you're getting hired for these commercial campaigns, or you're still doing the same thing that you were doing, 5 years ago. So it's very important to always stay true to yourself, but at the same time, be cognizant of what's going on around you as far as the industry goes, and what is accepted now. And what was accepted 5 years ago might not be what clients are looking for. At the end of the day, you want to book clients. So it's really important that you're paying attention to that. I will say the beautiful thing about it is that from what I've seen, retouching has scaled back over the years, especially in my styles of photography. So again, touching on beauty photography, swimwear, fashion, all that stuff. It used to be heavily photoshopped, picture perfect, every straight hair, every stretch mark, every little thing that you can think of that could be fixed, it was fixed. And it was perfected to a point where these people aren't even looking real, you know? Um, but that was what people were going after. People wanted that picture perfect shot. There are some clients out there that still want that, and that's okay. But as a photographer, I think one of the most important things is being flexible and not being so boxed in what you like to do and being open-minded to what your clients need. And so I'm always paying attention to what my client wants. I do have clients that still like a full-on hookup, and I'm all for it and I make it happen. But then I have a lot of clients that are now also realizing that the industry has shifted and people want to see real people. They want to see raw, more unedited looking type work. Even in the beauty industry, just depending on the brand, some are a little bit more like touched up than others, but everyone is scaling back with the big beauty brands. You even walk into some of these stores like Target and Walgreens, they are doing campaigns that they are not allowed to have work that is edited within their stores, because they don't want to endorse this picture perfect model because it's not achievable. One of the main things that my clients are asking for is we need to make this look achievable, something that the average customer can walk in, they see this, beautiful campaign, but they also feel like they can relate to it and they can actually look like that as well. So there's even been times, I'll even say there's times where I'll retouch something and I've been asked by the client, hey, this looks like so beautiful and perfect. Can you scale back? And so now I'm just doing it more and more. So with all that being said, I don't even get as caught up on the skin retouching aspect as I do on the color grading. Because in my opinion, I feel like color grading is a way to kind of set a mood, a feel, a whole atmosphere that basic retouching cannot do. Like if you do a regular skin retouch, sometimes my image still looks a little flat. It's like, okay, yeah, her skin looks perfect or close to perfect, but it's just not giving me what it needs to give. So with those subtle color shifts in the overall image, or maybe it be selective color, or I'm going to go through some of the things that we adjust when we're doing color grading. But sometimes I do overall picture changes. Sometimes I do selective adjustments. And all these things work into my favor because they tell a story. They pop off the screen. For me, I'm very into color. So I like intense stuff. And, you'll see in my work, I'm very big on like high contrast, really punchy photos. Sometimes I'll bring out colors in some parts of the photo and I'll scale back in some other areas to almost bring more light to the parts that I enhanced even further. So it does change from photo to photo. It is not a one size fit all. Be open-minded to every photo that comes through your way. Because at the end of the day, we're doing this to make money. And we love this. Like, first, I'm very passionate about what I do. I absolutely love being a photographer. It is my passion, it is my purpose. I don't see myself doing anything else. But at the end of the day, I still have a family to feed. I have a 6-year-old, I have a family. We're trying to travel. We're trying to do other things. I do have a life outside of this. And it is important that my passion also, funds the other things that I want to do in life. So with that being said, it's so vital to listen to your clients, because that will allow you to get repeat business and also expand you to other clients, because you're kind of listening to what the industry is saying. So does anyone have any questions about that before I get into like, color grading and skin retouching, or just any other just general questions just about, something that you need to answer on based on photography or maybe the beauty industry? I'm open.
Now is the time. Drop it in the chat, y'all, or feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself briefly and ask Jessy directly.
Yeah, feel free. Yeah.
Shy.
Hi, Jessy. I'm Christy. How are
Hey,
you?
how are you? Nice to
I'm
meet
good.
you.
Nice to meet you too. I do have a question for you because I grew up I started my photography in LA, and I started off first with like behind the scenes with like models and everything being on set. And I
Amazing.
knew one of the concerns that I personally had was that sometimes when it came to the male photographers, that they kind of, try to use the photography to, try to be, I want to say the word predator, but like kind of
Right.
like use that.
Yeah.
So did that inspire you to become a photographer to just be more safe for women?
You know what? Like that wasn't necessarily the inspiration, but I have seen that happen on multiple occasions. Even being a model myself, I have seen photographers take things for granted and take advantage of situations. But fortunately, I feel like it's the few bad apples that have you know, made it hard for other male photographers, because there are some amazing male photographers that I've worked with that are just killing the game, and I'm fully supportive of their work. But I definitely am a huge advocate of making it a safe place for anyone that I shoot, to make sure that they feel like they're comfortable at all times. And yeah, I want to do the exact opposite of what you mentioned with, some of these photographers just, you know, getting into it for the wrong reasons. I'm really here to uh, empower the people that I shoot. Just, and they're already beautiful people, but just to really show the world how beautiful they are as well, and creating that safe space at the same time.
Love it. Gonna ask a few of the questions that are in the chat before
Yeah.
moving to the actual workshop. Taylor asks, how did you land your first client?
Man, okay. So like, it's so hard to say who my first client is. I know it's kind of sad that I don't really know, because here's the thing. So when I first started, I did majority unpaid work for a very long time. I tested on a lot of people, and I tested at my house. Like I had an apartment, I had a second room, I set up my lights there, and I would literally bring people over there and start shooting. But what I can really speak on, which I think is even more important, is how did I start getting clients regularly. So I feel like it is very, very important to constantly market yourself, constantly put yourself out there. You got to keep in mind that the more people that hear your name or see your work, the more chances you get to booking clients. So you can have, I've seen some amazing photographers out there and no one knows about them. They're not even getting the clients. So I always tell people, like, consistency is always going to reign supreme over like being the most talented one in the room. I'm not the most talented one in the room. I'm okay with that, but I love what I do, and I think my work is bomb. Like it's might not be the best, but I'm okay with that. Like, there are clients that like what I do, and I give the results, and I'm consistent, and I show up every single time. I put myself out there. Even in a day and age, we're actually blessed to have social media to put our work out there on a platform where so many more people can actually see it. My dad was an artist. He didn't have that. He was struggling, and he had to be a jack of all trades, doing all this type of stuff within the artist world, like from sculpting to painting. He was doing graphic design work. He was a cartoonist. He was doing everything under the sun so he could get work. But now we can find a focus and put that out there, and then that niche that you focus on, you will get clients from that. So one of the things that I do suggest is find your niche early on, figure out what you love to do in photography, and then go from there. I thought I was going to shoot weddings and kids. I said, I'm not going to shoot models. This is not my thing. Like, I feel like I'm going to get help, like dealing with these people, even though I was a model myself. Maybe it's because I saw enough to be like, I don't know if this is what I want to do. So I was like, okay, I'm going to, try to shoot kids and families and, weddings, because I knew that that would be consistent. I live in Dallas. It's kind of commercial out here. So I just figured maybe that was the route to take. I shot a couple kids and I was like, nope, not doing it. Like, it was not for me. As soon as I started getting models in front of my camera, I was like, it did feel natural, and I felt like I could bring more to the table. And I started playing around with a whole bunch of different concepts. To the point where anytime I was doing a shoot, I was doing something new. I was putting it up on Instagram. This is when Instagram really first started coming around. And I started putting up stuff, and I would always put my booking information. I'd always make sure I put some proper tags. And I would ask the people that I would work with, hey, do you mind if you tag me? Since, I am offering a free service. After that, as soon as people started tagging me and resharing my work, I started getting more and more clients. Now, one of the things that did help me out in my career was working with a lot of influencers early on. So I would reach out to people with, anywhere at the time, like I probably had like 20,000 followers or something. And I would be reaching out to people with 100K to 500K to millions of followers. And I'd be like, okay, the worst thing they can do is say no. I just reach out to them. Hey, you want a free shoot? I would love to get an opportunity to do this really cool concept that I think will work perfect for you. And of course, I would be handling it very professionally. Sometimes I would figure out what their email was. Sometimes if I couldn't get access to that, I would send them a professional DM, but it wouldn't be like, hey, want to shoot? I would already have it, a nice little like blurb about me. I have a concept in mind. I'll be in your city at this time. Let me know if you're interested in shooting. Here's my contact info. The more you put out there and that initial greeting, I feel like you're going to get better results. So, sending a DM or email saying, hey, I'm a photographer, or like, we should shoot sometime. Get to the point, and you'll be amazed at some of the results you get. And so after time of like reaching out to so many people, I started getting bites. People started saying, yeah, I actually do need a photo shoot. So I started shooting these influencers. They started tagging my work. And then from there, I started getting bigger and bigger influencers. Some of these influencers were tied to beauty brands or fashion brands. And the fashion and beauty brands would start reaching out to me. And it just kind of like snowballed from there. So it has always been like going out there, putting my work in front of as many people as possible to get, the clients that I need. And I still do that to this day. I'm constantly trying to think of ways of, getting my work out there for people to see. So yeah, you got to be your biggest fan. You got to market yourself constantly, even when things are big. Because, during COVID, I was nervous for a second. I was like, am I going to be a photographer after this? Because this is really challenging. Like, nobody's booking for obvious reasons. And the crazy thing about it is that, probably now I'm in Texas, so things are a little bit different down here. We kind of do things a lot more lax in terms of like what was going on during COVID times when compared to like LA and New York. But when things did let up down here, which was like 3 months later, 4 months later, it picked up. And I ended up being the busiest that I've ever been. So it was definitely a blessing. But put yourself out there, constantly promote yourself, constantly think about new concepts, because my creative concepts have literally been like some of the biggest reasons why I get booked for campaigns, because maybe the creative director, they have this idea in mind. They're like, oh, Jessy shot something like this. So we know that she has the skill set to make the shot happen. So I've literally been booked for gigs, and I'll have my own work on the mood board. So it's been a blessing in itself, but always be creative. I'm always trying to learn new concepts. I'm not even a super technical person. So with that being said, I'm constantly challenging myself. I'm learning new things every day. Don't keep yourself in a box doing the same thing over and over and over again. But I will say, stick with a niche. At least have some type of niche, but try different concepts within that niche.
Ooh, listen, y'all. That was some free game, so much advice that you can apply.
Oh, and I will tell you, with that being said, like I never thought I'd be making well over six figures, like as a photographer. I literally thought this is going to be something that I would do on the side. And now I am making more money than I could ever dream of. So I am speaking on this because I've seen the fruits of my labor. Within the past like 3-4 years, it's been an incredible journey. It's been really, really awesome. But I've been very strategic about it. And, I'm constantly just making sure that I'm aware of what other people are doing, what other successful people are doing. And again, use that as fuel. So like, I do see other photographers that are, doing amazing things in the industry, and I watch what they're doing. And it inspires me. So use other people that are maybe in your genre and use them as inspiration, see what they're doing, and then not necessarily, I'm not about copying nobody. Make your brand and make it something that is your own, but definitely use other people as inspiration and see what they're doing to kind of help figure out if you're making the right decisions. And again, always go with your gut too, because what works for someone else might not work for you. So, sometimes it doesn't work going that route, but always go with your gut at the end of the day.
Jessy, this is why I love you so much.
Oh yeah, I would try. Look, I'm trying to share as much as I possibly can.
I just felt like I just went to church, the sermon, TED Talk, all of it. Thank you. There's a lot of great questions in the chat, but I'm going to put pause on that before we can get to the editing. And then as the bandwidth, we'll go back to those questions and get those answered. So Jessy, I'll let you, show us your workflow.
Oh yeah, I'm going to go through more of a step-by-step process with my color grading, because I know the focus is on color grading today. I'm going to slightly touch on skin retouching and a few other things, but right now, I'll be completely honest with you, color grading is the very most important thing to me as far as post-production does. I don't even care about skin retouching that much anymore, because there's some beauty images I've done that barely have any retouching, because that's what's being asked. But they do want the skin to look rich, or they want the makeup to pop a little bit. And those things, you don't necessarily have to edit the lips or the eyes. I mean, you really can just do a color shift, and that's all you need. So I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. Hold on for 1 second. And I have several images up. Hopefully this goes to the right one. Open system, okay. Okay, so give me a moment. Sorry, ladies.
No worries at all. I was just letting folks know that they can, drop some of those gems that you shared and tag VWP and you on social, and keep the questions coming in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can after this. And of course, if you're not already following Jessy, as you should be, you can at Jessy J Photo.
Can you still see me, Polly?
Yes.
Okay, great. Give me a moment. I'm gonna reopen my files. I think while I'm doing that, because it is kind of like an interesting situation, is making me close like Photoshop down completely. So what I can do is close these files down. And I'm sorry, I did not prepare myself. I can answer another question while I am doing this.
Denise, who also does makeup professionally, asks, what do you look for makeup artists that you work with?
She said what? What did she ask?
What do you look for with from makeup artists that you work with?
Yes. Okay. So definitely technique, hands down. Like it's so vital that they have like the proper techniques, and they're putting out like artistry work that's current, that's fresh. For example, like graphic eyeliner is really in. I also need people that know how to scale it down. So I don't always need someone that can do a beat face. The pretty beat face, like it just doesn't always work in every situation. For example, like an editorial fashion campaign, they literally might not want any makeup on the skin except some moisturizer, but they want the graphic eyeliner. So you just have to be flexible in that area and come up with some ideas too, because when I am working with makeup artists, I'm not always in the know of like what's trending, but I do need to like lean on them to know those things. So when we do collaborative projects together, that could potentially get us some more work, they already know what to do in order for that to happen.
Great advice for those who are also photographers looking for makeup artists to work with. Also good things to keep in mind of. Lilia asks, for beauty, what lens do you use?
So my lens, my go-to is my 24 to 70 millimeter lens. And it's actually really funny. I've been using that lens ever since I started. So the lens is about, it's probably like 8 years old now, which goes to show that you do not need to constantly invest in new photography. I don't care what anybody says. I'm all for it. Like, trust me, like I see all this new equipment out there and I would love to get my hands on some of it. However, it's not always necessary. It really isn't. Um, and I will say that even my camera body that I typically use is the same camera that I originally started using when I first started the photography game, which is really crazy. And I have upgraded. I've gotten a couple new or a couple new cameras, and I do use them for my like beauty campaigns and whatnot. But I use them just for that because they have like higher quality images. But for the most part, I use my same equipment, even my same lighting equipment. I've been blessed to work on sets where I am able to get like super expensive, equipment rented for my sets. But I use the same equipment and it works for me and I'm okay with it. But by all means, if you guys see some stuff out there that can help enhance your work, by all means, go for it and get it. But I wouldn't jump around and just start getting equipment just because. But my 24 to 70, it is extremely flexible. It gets the job done. I don't ever have to worry about like what kind of space I'm in because, I have the Zoom capabilities. And yeah, it's been a blessing. But then my second favorite is my 100 millimeter, and I use that for macro photography.
Amazing.
I'm still working on this, guys. I'm so sorry about that.
No problem. I'll ask another question then. Sardo, who's based in Gambia, you already shared a lot of great advice. What advice would you have, specifically for those who are based internationally, how they can get themselves out there? And because, social media, yes, is great, but it can be tricky. So if you have any, I don't know, any advice, because for you, you're based in Dallas, Texas, and I think a lot of photographers these days feel that they need to move to the Los Angeles and New Yorks of the world. But you just told us, you're making 6 figures plus in Dallas. You don't have to move from where you're at. So, any advice about that?
You definitely do not have to move. I can speak on this because lately I've been trying to do more like international stuff. And I think it's really important to kind of do some digging and research on platforms like Instagram. I actually use hashtags quite often, and it's helped me out a lot. For example, when I did go to Africa recently, and I was looking to kind of like build like a client base out there, I was, kind of just posting images from my own trip, and I would hashtag like, you know, um, African models or Kenyan models or Kenyan photographers. And I actually had people reaching out to me that were, you know, interested in aligning and doing stuff in the future because I use those proper hashtags. So do digging through those hashtags. And even if you look on Instagram and check out locations, you will be able to find loads of information on locations to use, maybe like models to work with. But it really starts with, in my opinion, like just by digging on Instagram, because I feel like it's very current and you're going to get, you know, access to models and even photographers. Photographers are willing to help, but you'll get access to those people much easier than like sending an email. So I just shoot these people a DM and whatnot. Okay, we're almost there, guys. Hold on for 1 second. I am going to see if this works now. I am extremely sorry about that.
No worries at all.
Yeah, let me shut down my. So how many people do we currently have on?
So I was over here looking for the mute button and seeing all the great questions and a lot of thank yous already in the chat. So feel free to keep, again, the questions coming. As I said, we'll try to answer them later. I do see your connection was a little fuzzy, but I think I see you, I hear you, look good.
Okay, we'll try this again. Let's see if we can. I'm praying that this works, guys. Sorry. How are we looking? No?
I still just see you.
Okay, hold on. Let me try this real quick. Yeah, I think it's because it's being recorded. It's I'm having security and privacy issues, so I have to adjust settings. It's saying something about us being recorded, so I have to allow certain apps, which I didn't know that was even going to be a thing through here. But let's see if it works now. If it doesn't, I may have to log back into you guys and see if there's another way.
No problem.
Let's see if it works now. Okay. All right. I think we're ready to go, ready to rock.
Right. That is the photo.
Sorry, ladies. Thank you for being patient with me. Goodness. Okay. So, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead, and I had other images up, but I did have to shut down my Photoshop. But I think this is like a really good image to work with. So I do want to tell you guys that I do have a heavy focus in swimwear photography. Again, I like to have like bold, vibrant colors, and this is kind of, you know, an example of what I like to do. Now, definitely by all means, if you guys have questions in like other areas of like images that aren't necessarily bold and punchy, I can definitely, you know, try to give my tips and pointers. But I feel like retouching is not a one size fits all. Everyone has different styles. So hopefully I do have the ability to answer all your questions, but I definitely have a specific style that I'm gonna kind of share with you, like my process. And if there's questions that you guys have outside of that process, I'll do my best to, you know, answer them the best I can. So I did write a couple things down because I did not want to kind of be all over the place in this process. But one of the things that I just want to like touch on is, you know, when you're doing color grading, when you're doing treatment of your photos, you want to create like an atmosphere. You want to tell a story. You know, the biggest thing is finding a way to captivate your audience in less than like 3 seconds when they're swiping through, because a lot of people are booking photographers and videographers and Black creatives and creatives through Instagram and TikTok. So, you know, as much as some people want to think that, yeah, I'm trying to get traffic to my website, people want to see your work on those platforms, even Facebook as well. So you have to find a way to captivate and engage your audience. And I feel like like having the right colors and tones to your image can really make that statement and captivate your audience. So there is a lot of different software out there that is available. You know, probably some of the ones that I see most are obviously like Adobe Lightroom, Adobe Photoshop, and also Capture One. My go-tos are Adobe Lightroom as well as Adobe Photoshop. But as you can see, we're in Photoshop. So we're going to really touch on that today because that's where I started. I typically live in Photoshop more than anything else. I do a lot of stuff in Lightroom as well. But as far as like skin retouching goes and color grading, I like to go here. If I'm doing like a lot of batch retouching, or I'm sorry, like batch color grading, I'll probably go to Lightroom. But that's for like much larger projects where I have to do tons of photos in you know, one sitting. So as far as like post-production, you know, I like to tell people don't get caught up in the post-production and color grading process, because I think it is vital that your images look incredible out the camera. It's really, really important to tether if you can. If you guys don't know what tethering is, it's essentially using a cord, syncing it up to your laptop so you can see the images and how they look, you know, when they're much larger in size. I feel like a lot of images look good in the camera, you know, when you're looking at the back of the screen, but once you open it up, especially for myself, you know, working in fashion and beauty, all those little details matter. So it's important to see things on a bigger screen so you know what to fix. Because the last thing you want to do is go home and realize that you have a lot of skin retouching and fixing to do, and you got to fix makeup now because things weren't perfected in camera. So taking that additional time while you're on set, and you know, not even holding back with your questions to, like, you know, your makeup artist, the people that you're working with, you know, if you have a client there, get their feedback. I have now learned to not take anything personally. So if someone doesn't like something, I'll be like, okay, awesome. Let's figure out a way to make it better. Because I have been in rooms where it's very critical and you have 10 people looking at a screen, looking at your image and dissecting it. This needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. And I used to get really nervous about it, be upset about it. And now I embrace it. And in fact, if I'm not getting people, you know, looking at the image and giving me their true thoughts, then I know I'm setting myself up for a disaster on the back end when I go home and do my retouching. So get that feedback from your clients early on, prior to leaving the set, so you can spend more time doing fun stuff like the color grading versus the skin retouching and object removal and fixing, you know, wrinkles in clothing. All those things matter. And you got to keep in mind, as a photographer, you only have so many hours in the day. I've literally spent, you know, countless hours fixing things that I probably could have fixed right in camera on set. So big piece of advice when you guys are, you know, shooting. And, you know, I don't want you guys to ever think that everything can be resolved in Photoshop. It cannot. Get it as good in camera as you possibly can. As far as shooting goes, and, you know, making sure that you are getting the right images for post-production work, always make sure you guys are shooting in RAW. I'm hoping that everyone shoots in RAW, And if you're shooting in JPEG, then please, make that simple change on your camera as soon as possible and shift to RAW settings. You have more flexibility and control when you're making your color adjustments and doing color grading on the back end. So once you do your photo shoot, you get home and you know what type of images that you have to retouch. The two parts that you have to consider, because I believe it is a two-part process, is color correction and then the color grading. So the color correction, the color correction would basically be, neutralizing your photo, making sure it's properly balanced. So things to consider like temperature or color temperature, white balance, highlights on the skin, noise, midtones, and exposure are things that you probably want to adjust prior to color grading. So you want to get a really nice, neutral, even photo before you get into doing the creative aspect to it. So this image that I'm showing you guys right now is, it has been edited. The skin has been edited. I will say this is an older image, and even looking at this image, I think I retouched it too much. I like to see more skin. I like to see more texture. In fact, when I do edits, I do some enhancements just in face, just a little bit. I might clean up underarms. I like to do bikini line. I like to hit the knees, but everything else probably could have gone untouched. So that's kind of where I'm at now. If you go to my Instagram, I just recently put up a photo of a shoot that I did in Jamaica, and the edits took me less than 10 minutes because all I did was fix those areas that I just discussed, and I did a color grade, and I was good to go. Where before, an edit might take 30 minutes to 2.5 hours. It just depends on what it is, especially with like the fashion stuff. Now, beauty can take even longer. So now I've learned to scale back because people want to see the raw and the real. I keep stretch marks. I keep, on thighs, stomach, all that, unless the client requests it. So again, if you're all about like keeping things real and raw, by all means go for it, but also make sure that your client's okay with that too. Because even though I'm embracing the new real and raw is in, some of my clients, they still want to look a certain way. And so I listen to their advice and I fix the things that need to be fixed. So just be open-minded, just, going back and editing a little bit more too. But in my opinion, this model, she's absolutely stunning. She didn't need really much of anything, but this is an old retouched image. This is prior to the color grading. So when I look at this image, I've now started to train my eyes on looking at the skin tone and seeing things that I need to correct. So I'm kind of bouncing around now, but that is one of the first things that I will do is color correction on the skin before I do color grading. But going back to, neutralizing your image, I like to go into camera raw. Now, camera raw, as soon as you open up your raw files, you'll automatically be taken into camera raw, and you can make those adjustments there. So I'm gonna, even though this is a JPEG image, and the reason why this is JPEG is because I used it for something else, and obviously we would be working with raw images for this, but I do want to show you what it looks like when you go to camera raw, and hopefully you guys can see this. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So the image hasn't popped up, but as you can see, for the things that I was talking about, some of the main points that I like to do to neutralize my image is adjusting the exposure, adjusting highlights and shadows, and then also making sure that my image is properly white balanced. So white balance, I'm typically looking at this color temperature right here. And I typically use those color checkers, the ones that have tons of different colors on them. I'll use those for the majority of my photo shoots. For my on-location shoots, I don't always have one. So sometimes I eyeball it. I will say this though, white balance works when you're doing fashion and beauty shoots, but when you're doing creative stuff, you don't always have to like do this proper color temperature fix, because sometimes it's not necessary, and sometimes I like cooler images as far as color temperature goes. I typically scale back on temperature opposed to going more yellow, especially when I'm working with like deeper skin tones, and you'll see why shortly. So hold on for 1 second. Out of this. So as far as the color grading tips go, after I do my skin retouching, after I neutralize a photo and I do some selective color adjustments on the skin to kind of properly tone it, you know, if there's too many yellows or reds or greens in the skin, I'll correct this first and I do the color grading. As far as color grading goes, I like to go into adjusting color wheels in the camera raw, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. I like to use curve adjustments, and I also like to, as of recently, add grain or texture. I typically had a very super clear image, but now I like to add a little grain. It gives it a little bit more of like a retro vintage feel. So these images that I just recently posted in Jamaica, I added a little grain. I did a few color adjustments to like the green in the trees, and it gave it a little bit more of like a retro vibe to it. Now, as far as color grading tips go, sometimes I do selective color grading to the subject or the background, and sometimes I do overall adjustments, or sometimes I do both. So sometimes I will literally look at a subject and I will just do color grading on maybe the dress that they're wearing. Or if I really want to amp it up, I'll do like the overall image. So there's different ways that you can apply these techniques. But the top two for me is doing selective or overall color grading techniques to your image. So as far as the steps go, you know, once you have your image, you bring it into Photoshop. The first thing that I do is I always make sure, and can you guys see what I'm doing? Hold on for 1 second. Let's do that. So that actually has some adjustments on it. So can you guys see the side panel with the menu and the layers, or can you only see that image?
I only see the image. I did see the side panel for like 2 seconds though, but I noticed the difference.
Hold on for 1 second. Let's see if it will show my entire screen. I'm gonna do my whole desktop so you guys can see it all. There you go.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize what to ask you.
Oh, that's okay. All right, can you guys see everything?
Yes.
Awesome. So the first thing that is really important when you're working in Photoshop is duplicating your layers. So anything you ever bring into Photoshop, I never work on the background copy. I always want to make sure I have an original. So the first thing that I do is I literally take this and I drag it into this plus sign and I duplicate my background copy. Now, as you guys know, many software systems that we have out there, there's various different techniques to do to get the same results. But that's what I do. I drag it to that plus sign and it duplicates my layer. And as you can see, it says background copy. And again, the reason why I do this is because I always want to have my original file available. And it's so important to have your original file available pre all the color adjustments, because in an event that your client or you decide that you want to make further changes or scale back, you still have the original image to work with. or if you needed to scrap all of your stuff in general and you want to start, you know, fresh, you have that original photo. So as soon as you duplicate that layer, you either have a like option to create a smart object, and a smart object, it's ultimately like a non-destructive layer in Photoshop, and any edits that you apply to a smart object, they can be undone or revisited, and they're never baked permanently into the layer. I don't use smart objects all the time, but I do use them. But what I will do is just show you how you can go about creating a smart object, but I will go back to just not using that for now because I really want to jump in on color grading and skin retouching. So right here, all you have to do is do a little right click on that extra layer and you're going to convert it to a smart object. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to undo this. And like I said before, let's just say that this was a raw file. You would do your skin retouching right now. And then you would go ahead and get into the color grading. Now, I look at this image right off the bat, I already see that there's some areas that I probably want to correct before I get into color grading. So when I look at this, I see that this side of the leg is a little bit more saturated than the rest of the body. You know, I'm seeing some yellows in the skin tone that I particularly would like to change. I like to remove yellows, overly saturated skin, and even areas of the skin where there's not much color. I like to enhance that to bring color back to it. So let me just show you a couple techniques that I use in order to make those skin color adjustments before I get into overall like color grading. So I'm going to first take a look at this side of the leg. And as you can see, when you compare it to this left leg, obviously there's some shadows on there, but I'm looking at it and it looks a little bit more saturated than what I would like. So there's several different ways that you can mask this out or, you know, select it to edit it. But what I'm going to do is, hold on for 1 second. I'm going to use my quick selection tool. And it's over here for anyone, because I don't know, can you ask, is everyone somewhat familiar with Photoshop, or there's some people that have never used Photoshop before?
You can drop it in the chat, y'all. Your comfort level with Photoshop. We did do a Lightroom and Photoshop 101. Okay, like a lot of people, most people are familiar, which is great. Amazing. So I'll drop that past recording in the chat.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do a selection tool on this leg. And I will say, just over the years, my eyes have been trained to see these things more than like the way it was when I first started. So, you know, early on, I would look at this and I'd be like, oh, everything looks fine. But now all I see is color. So I automatically was drawn to this leg and I was like, I need to fix that. It looks way too saturated and there's too much reds and yellows in the skin. So I'm going to take this entire leg, and what I'm going to do, one of my favorite adjustment layers to use is selective color. So I do go down here, I create my selective color, and as you can see, I mask the entire leg, but I know that this mask is probably needs to be corrected a little bit. So what I do is I click on this and I click on option, and now I can see that the entire leg's selected, but I know from the kneecap down, it didn't look too bad. So I'm going to actually adjust this mask. And I'm going to just focus on this area. And I'm okay with the feathering because we'll give it more natural results. From there, There's several different techniques that you can use when you're correcting colors on skin, but selective coloring is one of my favorites. And I typically find myself mostly in the red and yellow selective color tones. And if I'm doing like fashion ads, or if I'm fixing, you know, as you can see, there's blues and greens because we're, I think in Miami for this photo shoot. I'll typically go there when I start doing my color grading. But for this is just for the skin component and fixing those. So we're gonna go back to the red, and I typically will amp up my cyan, or I will bring down my magentas or yellows to get the results that I need. And I do a lot of playing around with stuff. It's, again, not a one size fits all. Every time I do this, I find myself doing a different technique, but I will say that I'm always in selective coloring for almost all of my images. So I will crank up the cyan a little bit. I'll see what happens there. You guys might not see it too much, but I see a color shift. It's very subtle. Again, these are all really subtle color shifts. Like, I'm not doing anything super extreme here. So I just amped up the cyans a little bit. And as you can see, some of that red diminish. It's very subtle. I don't know if you guys see that, but if you do, great. And then I think it's looking a little yellow at this point. It could probably be brought down in yellows just slightly. So I'll go ahead and take down the yellows just a little bit. See if I like it. It's looking a little bit better. So as you can see, here's the before, here's the after. It's very, very subtle, but it definitely makes a huge difference. And take down the magentas just slightly, ever so slightly. And now, when you look at it, you can see that, I don't know if, can you guys see that? Polly, can you see the before and after?
I can see the before.
So here's the before,
Mm-hmm.
and here's the after. And it's very, very subtle, guys, but it's very important to, you know, have those like subtle color shifts so everything looks properly, you know, exposed, and you don't have like blotchy skin, and there's not areas that are super saturated and some that are not at all. Now, there's still some saturation in here, and I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to take the same adjustment, and I'm going to go into, I'm either going to do Hue Saturation or go to black and white. So sometimes I'll go to Hue Saturation, and I'll just go to master because it's already selected on that leg, and I'll bring it down just a little bit. So I brought it down to a -7. Again, it's very, very subtle. But as you can see with those further adjustments, the skin in this area is starting to look a lot more even. So I'm going to go ahead and group these together so you can see the results a little bit easier. So there's the before and there's the after. Now, if you're trying to even things out a little bit further, there's a little bit of red on her knee. So I'm going to go ahead and actually use my brush tool at this point, because these like color adjustments are so subtle. I have a feathered brush. I never use a hard brush, and I try to use a medium-sized brush. Nothing too big, nothing too small. Hardness on 0. I make sure that my brush is on white because, as you guys know, the white brush is what exposes the color adjustments and black takes away. So white adds, black takes away. So I use that brush, and I will adjust my flow to about 20%. Now, the difference between flow and opacity is if I was to do my opacity to 20, and I just go over this back and forth over and over and over again, the opacity on this color shift will stay at 20%. But if I do my flow, it's a nice buildup. So let me actually just show you guys real quick. I'm gonna get this on 100% and just show you. And I think it's very, very important to understand your brush tools, because those are the things that help me with my editing process and make it very smooth. and efficient. So again, here we have an opacity of 50%. I'm going to show you what this brush does. You go back and forth. As you can see, the opacity stays at 50%. You can go back and forth over and over and over and over again, right? Now, if you take that flow brush and you take this opacity to 100% and the flow to 20, or roughly to 20, if you go back over it over and over again, as you can see, it builds and builds. So it's a slow build, and it's almost like you were using an actual pencil or paintbrush or marker. The more and more you go over it, the darker it gets. So I like to use a flow brush that I can do a quick build of adding or taking away. And it allows me to see like if I need to keep going or not. I hope that helps out a little bit. So with that being said, we're going to keep this flow brush. I'm going to keep it on white. And I want to, you know, take a little bit away of this saturation on her knee. So I use my brush and I just do an eyeball. I just eyeball it. I notice that there's a little bit of saturation on her chest. I just move that around. So again, I'm on Hue Saturation layer. There's a little saturation on her nose, especially. As you could see, if you look at her skin, her nose has a lot of reds and yellows in it. So I'm actually going to go back to the selective color right here and start there. And let's go over this nose. And then when I find that I've gone to the point of I can't really do anymore, I go into my Hue Saturation because I see that there is a little bit more saturation that needs to be removed. And I'll hit that nose a little bit further. So here's a before and here's an after, okay? I'll do some more on her skin as well. I just think it's a little bit too saturated. There's some yellows in here that need to be taken away. Because the ultimate goal is I want to have rich skin tones. I don't want them to look muddy. I want them to jump and pop off the screen. I'm going to do just a little bit more over here, and then we can go into some color grading techniques. Do we have any questions about that so far?
Ooh. Y'all, if you have any questions relevant to what she just shared, drop it in the chat or just unmute yourself. You can use the raise hand tool and unmute yourself if you'd like to just ask directly. Listen, this is like a foreign language to me, so I love this because you're simplifying it.
so now that we've used this like selective coloring to adjust, like, you know, not necessarily issues with the skin, just there's some skin tones that just need to be evened out a little bit, we'll use this. Now, the other way that I do adjustments is when I'm looking at areas of the skin that don't have enough pigment to them. So I would say this image, it looks pretty solid, but something like her kneecap, for example, I see that there is an area that is a little bit more, like has gray undertones when compared to above her kneecap. So when I take this and I take a look at this area, as you can see, you go into color chart, it's a little bit more on the gray side. And then when I go ahead and select above her knee, as you can see, it has a little bit more red tones. Now, here's the thing. This is a personal decision. Some people, you don't even need to adjust this, nobody cares. When I'm doing beauty, I wouldn't necessarily worry about this as much with like fashion and swimwear and whatnot, but maybe for beauty retouching, if there's gray areas on the skin and you're doing a macro shot, it's important to correct those areas. So the thing that I personally like to do, it's just very simple, is I will take my color picker, I will select an area nearby the area of gray skin that needs to be corrected, and I will color over with that color. But here's what I do, because if I use this color above and I use the technique I'm about to show you, it's not going to show up as vibrant as I would like. So I go into my color chart and I actually amp it up just a little bit, and I go to a little bit more saturated color, okay? There's not really a science to it. It's just a whole bunch of trial and error, but I do go to an area that's a little bit more saturated. I hit okay. I create a blank layer, and I'm going to take this from normal to color mode. And I'm going to show you why. Because if I go and stay on normal and I paint over this just like this, as you can see, that's what you're going to get. But then let's undo this brush. I'm going to go to color mode. And if I go over this, it blends into the skin. So I think that was probably a little bit too much, because I really want to be subtle in this. And I would like to show just a little bit of the gray because I want it to look real. We don't want the skin to look exactly the same from head to toe, but there are some areas where if it stands out, then we want to tone it down just a little bit. So I think it's more about toning down than making everything look the same from, you know, your head all the way down to your feet. So I'm going to go ahead and take a brush with a flow of 3. I like to typically use like 1 to 3% on this, and I'll run over it just a little bit. That's a little bit too much. I'm going to undo that. Let's run over it just a little bit, because a little bit goes a long way. And now I found that my kneecap does not look gray anymore. It's very, very subtle. Very subtle. So here is the before of her leg, and here is the after. We can go, if you look at the inside, I would never like actually take the time to fix the inside of her arm, but that's like the only area I can find that is gray skin. But I just want to show you another example of what it looks like when you see areas on someone's body that has more gray undertones. If you want to correct those, here's again what it looks like when you run that little color brush over. And then here's the before and here's the after. Very, very subtle. And I'll do a quick scan. I'm constantly scanning. There's probably, you know, other things that could be fixed, but to me, there's nothing standing out. And that's the biggest thing. You don't want anything to stand out unless you want it to stand out. You know, these selective color adjustments are very, very important in my line of work. So the way that I mask there is pretty standard to how I do my masking, but a few other areas of like where you can mask and get some really cool, you know, just different masking techniques where you can select things that would probably be a little bit more difficult than just using your quick selection tool. You can do it here. So I go to select, I go to color range, and here is where you can do more color grading adjustments. So I typically like to do a little bit more manually. So I would stay in sample colors, and I click on this plus sign, and you can literally select different colors. And if you stay on the plus sign, it will literally just add to that selection. Now, if you have the selector where it doesn't have a plus or minus sign, it will select that and that's it. You can click on other areas and it will just focus on that area that you're clicking on. But I do like to use my add, and that's where I can get some really nice selecting and masking. There's a fuzziness tool as well, and you are able to bring in more colors similar to it. As you can see, the higher the fuzziness, the more on the image that it selects. And again, I use color range often because I will get requests to fix specific tones on an image. And sometimes this is the best way that I go about doing this. Specifically color tones, I mean, with the skin. So if I go back into the color range, and if I click on reds, as you can see, the red undertones and tones in this image are mostly on her body. Now, I don't like selecting these colors because I feel like I can get more control when I do sample colors, but just so you can see, this is how you can select all the yellows on the screen, all the greens, cyans, blues. That's how you can get that. But with the sample colors, you can get better results in my opinion. I use this often because sometimes I just need to do selections with the just the skin and nothing else on the screen. So I'll bring that down. And what I've found that if you have an image with a lot of reds and yellows in it outside of the subject, then don't use color range because as you can see here, you have a lot of trees in the background that are being selected because, you know, the system is automatically saying, okay, you're selecting yellows and reds. Well, there's some yellows and reds in the trees behind her as well. But if you want to work around that, you can go ahead and you can just select your subject. So you can mask out your subject and then you can go back into color range. Sometimes I'm going to do just like a quick little, you know, this is not a perfect selection by no means, but it's something very, very quick. And I can go back into color range and I would definitely take a little bit more time with that. I'd go back into color range and I would start making these selections. Now, even though you see the trees and stuff behind it, when you come out of this, you should be able to get selections on just the skin. So we'll play around with that. And again, you know, this probably is not considered the perfect example for this, but just know this option is available. And I use this quite often actually. So definitely don't underestimate it. So as you can see, after I hit select, everything on the subject was selected and nothing in the background because I did that selection. I masked it out before I went to that selection. So I'm just gonna go to, we'll go to curves real quick. And as you can see, I'm making adjustments to just her body, okay? So that's how I do selections. I either use, you know, my quick selection tool or I use my color range. I don't use subject often. I'm going to start using it more, but there is another option to select your subject if you do a lot of portraits by selecting subject here, and it will automatically just calculate it out for you. And there you go. Your model is selected. You know, at the end of the day, the problem is with a lot of these is that they still have clothing on. You still have to, you know, mask that out. So masking is, you know, it takes time. It can take a little bit longer than what you anticipate for. But if you do the right masking, you take your time with it. When you do these overall and selective color adjustments, it's going to look more precise and you're going to get the results that you're really striving to achieve. Any questions so far? We're almost done with this, guys. I know we're a little bit over, but we're almost done. But what I am going to go into is like some of my favorite color adjustments after I mask. So we finished the masking. Now I'm going to go into the actual color grading.
This has just been like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to share as much as I can. I hope
smarter, like working smarter, not harder.
Yes.
Taylor, I saw you did your whole mind blown. Taylor, go ahead. I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Okay, I hope it's not too loud. I'm in a cafe, so if it is, just let me know.
No, you're fine.
But, first off, you are my favorite photographer. So when I saw that you were going to be the guest for today, I was like, oh, I'm hopping on. So I've just been fanboying over here, so excuse me.
Thank you so much. I mean so much. Thank you.
No, of course. Like, I love your work.
Wow.
And I'm just kind of sitting here mind blown because a lot of the things that you do, especially with selective color, I kind of already do. But then you're like just taking it to the infinite power. And I just thought it was kind of crazy because I have so many edits to do today. And I'm just like,
I
It's
know.
gonna be different.
I
But my
know.
question that I had was, when it comes to all of these techniques, was it something that you found that you stumbled on accident, or did you try to actually research ways that you can emphasize your color grading as well as your color adjustments?
So I'll be completely honest with you. A lot of the stuff I stumble upon, I do a lot of trial and error. I'm one of those people where you give me something that has an instruction manual, and I'll try to figure it out before reading the instructions. So, with that being said, when I first got into Photoshop, I was just clicking on stuff. I was just trying new things. Oh, what does this do? What does that do? Over time, of course, like, I started, looking things up. But originally, a lot of it was trial and error. That never hurts either, though, because it is interesting seeing all the stuff that Photoshop has to offer. There's so many cool features that I probably still don't even know about, but I'm constantly learning on the software system. But yeah, it's definitely a combination of trial and error, just like playing around with different things and then just doing some research myself. But I will say that my techniques might not work for everyone. And someone else's techniques that you might see online, they might not work either. You have to play around with several techniques until you find one that works for you. So, I'm really sharing the ones that have worked for me. They make my life easier. I feel comfortable in these areas. And so far, I've been getting really good results from them.
No, that's definitely good to know. I will definitely say a lot of my editing techniques I do now were just completely found on accident and sometimes by a mistake. So I like click on the wrong thing. I'm like, oh wait, this is a mistake. And then I'm like,
Yes.
oh wait, this might be it.
Yes. So now I'm going to go ahead. Is there anything else do you have any other questions though?
No, you answered them perfectly. Thank you.
Perfect. Good. So after we do this masking, the biggest thing that I like to focus on for like general color grading adjustments is curves adjustments, hues and saturation, selective color, and black and white. We've already touched on selective color, but let's kind of talk about it in an overall photo standpoint. Because we just did selective coloring to fix some, color issues on the skin. So let's go ahead and go into that. So for my selective coloring, as you guys know, I work with a lot of women of color, a lot of deep, dark skin tones, and curves, selective coloring, black and white, hues and saturation, it's my go-to. So if I want to enhance a photo, I am not scared to play around with the selective coloring and just seeing what works best. I don't get caught up in making skin tones look the same from photo to photo. So I literally could work on 5 different images with 5 models with all the same skin tone, but I might make adjustments differently on each one of them because the clothing that they're wearing, the environment that they're in, and the story that I'm trying to tell, it requires different colors and tones. And this one, I'm looking at it and, I'm seeing the blue skies. I see the palm trees behind her. And because those are such a focal point in addition to her, I kind of want to amp up more of the colors in the background versus the colors on her. I feel like she looks great. Maybe I'll deepen it. Maybe I'll add some contrast. So we're going to play around with it. So let's see. Let's go ahead. We're going to, just for the sake of it, because I talked about subject, select subject. I want to start using it more often. So I'm going to do it right here. Let's go ahead and kind of bring the saturation out of her skin even further so I can enhance the background a lot more. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the selective color tool, and we're not going to worry about the swimsuit right now. We can deal with that later. And I think I want to go ahead and make her skin a little bit more cyan, take the reds out completely, and I want to make it real deep chocolate. I'm going to remove some of these magentas, and I'm going to take some of these yellows out, and I'm going to increase my blacks. So as you can see, the skin tone has gotten richer, but the color has been taken out of it. So here again, with the selective coloring that I did prior to doing this overall adjustment on her skin, and then with the selective coloring that I'm just doing, here's the before and here's the after. It's very, very subtle. So now that I've done that, my other favorite tool to use is black and white. And some people are like, black and white, why would you use black and white? Here's why. For some reason, when I change my black and white to luminosity, change the layer to a luminosity layer, the skin gets super, super rich. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna go into black and white. I want to create the same mask on this black and white layer. And as you can see, she's black and white, but when you switch it to luminosity, it deepens it even further. Now, it's very subtle right here, but what I do is I go into the actual black and white layer, and as you can see, black and white, it's not a one size fits all either. It's not like, oh, I just turned it to black and white. You can actually adjust the blacks and whites and the reds, the yellows, the greens, cyans, blues, and magentas. So in this case, because we're focused on skin tone, and there's a lot of reds in her skin and yellows, I like to make adjustments to the reds and yellows. So I actually want to deepen it. So I'm going to take this dial and I'm going to bring it down. So as you can see, the color is getting richer, like real chocolate. Oh gosh, it's so chocolate and yummy looking. I love it. Yeah, this is the stuff that I love doing. This is the fun part to me. The skin retouching, I'm like, man, like I'm not about it. It's like, I know it's required for some of the jobs I do, but when I do this stuff, it's fun to me. So I play around with it. I'm adjusting this yellow layer. I'm seeing what's like really, getting me excited, and then I move on. So this is looking pretty rich. It's looking real nice. But now that I brought that down, it looks like I can decrease the saturation a little bit. So I'm actually going to go into Hue Saturation color adjustment. I'm going to create another layer mask, and let's just desaturate this a little bit. Let's see. I don't want to change the hue. I want to change the saturation. I want to bring it down just a little bit. All right. So I brought it down to 10. So now these global skin adjustments I did, I'll group this so you guys can see what we're working with. Here is the before, here's the after, okay? Now, if I'm like trying to do like an artistic piece, something that I was gonna put up on a wall, like I would go for this heavy contrast look. Now, you might see this and be like, nah, that doesn't look right. It's not her skin tone. I do this for a lot of my pieces to add like this bold impact to it. It's not necessarily to just fix her skin tone just for the sake of it. It's just because the overall image, it just pops more. She has beautiful skin tone prior to this. But if it's too much for you, instead of scaling back on each one of these, I typically just take my opacity tool once I group it all together. So I like to put my color adjustments in a group. And then if I want to, bring it back a little bit, I'll take opacity and I'll just bring it down. So let's just bring it down a little bit, because maybe it's just, a bit too rich. Now, because I made these adjustments and I did make the adjustments to the swimsuit as well, I want the swimsuit to actually pop off her skin. So now that I've made those adjustments and I ended up, doing adjustments to the swimsuit as well, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna mask out this swimsuit So it's a little bit brighter than her skin. So I'm gonna actually, this isn't gonna be very accurate. And obviously I wouldn't use a brush like this for everything. You can do, we could use this, but it'll take a little bit more time. But for now, just so you guys can see what it looks like, I'm gonna run this brush over, hold on. I'm gonna do a black brush because I want to remove those color adjustments that I just did on her skin. And now you can see it's starting to glow. The swimsuit is now glowing off her skin. And let's say I just want to amp it up even further. Let's say I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know what? I really just want the swimsuit to look like it's glowing in the dark off her skin. So I'm gonna take this mask, okay? It's not perfect right now. I can perfect those things later, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna take this curves adjustment, okay? And let's inverse this. So hold on. So I did a inverted layer mask. So now the swimsuit is adjusted and will be the only thing that's impacted. And I am going to amp up the swimsuit even further. Now there's a few ways you could do this. Two of my favorite ways are, you know, bringing this up right here, kind of in the mid-tones range, and then bringing this down. So as you can see, it's popping off. Now you can see it's a little bit more fiery. There's some saturation in there. It's really jumping off the screen and it's jumping off her skin. The other option that I like to go to is, it's a little bit more intense, is I will drag this part of the curves adjustment back and I'll give it more contrast by taking the blacks and I'll bring those down. So as you can see, you have this like super punchy, cool swimsuit jumping off her beautiful chocolate skin. But like I said before, I really wanted to amp up the blue skies. I wanted to also amp up the greens. So now we're gonna go back into selective coloring and we're going to bring those up a notch. So I'm just gonna create another selective color layer. And because blues and greens typically aren't in people's skin at all, that's why you see people doing a lot of work on green screens and blue screens. I don't need to do any masking in this situation. So, and there's not any greens or blues in her swimsuit. So I can go straight into selective coloring and I can play around with these colors. So we're just gonna see what we like. And a lot of times I literally play around with this and just see what jumps out at me. I think this is kind of a cool effect. I like how the blue has a little bit more aqua in it. Let's see what it looks like when I add some yellow. I'm okay with that. I'm gonna go to the cyans because there's definitely some cyan in the sky. I'll bring this down just a little bit, mute it just a little bit more. You can adjust the magentas. I'm not gonna touch this too much because I kind of like where we're at right now. And then we are going to go into the greens. So from here with the greens, there's a couple things. I think let's see, cyans, I'm gonna bring those down. So I do remember there was a lot of yellows in the greens, so we can actually go back into this real quick and we'll do a mask. We're gonna mask this, the green in the trees. So I'm gonna do a quick little mask, and remember, I'm not too concerned about it being perfect right now because there's not any green in the sky. There's some yellow on her skin, but I don't think it's gonna be impacted too much based on her skin color. So I'm doing like a quick little mask. It is not perfect. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of my masks aren't totally perfect. and that's okay. So I do my selective coloring for this mask, and now I can make these shifts. So as you can see, I'm taking the cyans, I'm shifting from one side to the next. We have a cool green, then it gets a little orange. I'm definitely liking this cool green, but let's see if I want to amp up. Well, that's a little too much with the magenta. Let's play around with these yellows. I think I might pull that back just a little bit. Blacks. I think we're good right there. It's a very subtle change, but I made it a little bit cooler. So I'm going to group all this up so you can see how it looks with the before and after. So here's the before and here's the after. Before, after. And the beautiful thing about this, I have everything in a group. If you want to scale back everything I just did, all you have to do is bring the opacity down. So I do this often too. I'll look at it, I'll be like, oh, this is too much. I'll take it to 70%. So I'm back down to 70%. And there's your before, there's your after. So that's my main way that I do my color grading. But the other way is going into Camera Raw. And I do use Camera Raw often because I have saved presets in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just show you the other way that I would go about doing this. And I go back and forth. I typically go this direction, but I definitely use Camera Raw. It just, you know, depends on how I feel. So we're gonna click on Camera Raw filter. And in here, I'm gonna show you some of my favorite adjustments that I like to use to get like deeper skin tones or just impact overall skin tones in your image. So I think white balance is probably the #1 thing that has a huge impact in my opinion. I noticed with like deeper skin tones, I prefer to like typically have the temperature on a cooler side. So just bringing it down, as you can see on the cooler side, you can see there's less yellows in the skin. It doesn't look as yellow for obvious reasons, because as you can see, it goes from blue to yellow. So I do pull this down a little bit. As far as exposure goes, I could probably amp this up just a little bit in this case. Highlights and shadows I do use often. So as you can see, there's a lot of highlights on her skin. It looks like all the information's there though. So if you ever see blown out skin, you probably want to bring down your highlights. So this is what the highlights look like when you amp them up, and this is what happens when you bring them down. I would say I'm looking at this, the information's there. I might bring it down just a little bit so I can get it a little bit more information in the shot. For example, like the sand in the back. And then there are some deep shadows in our hair. So I'm gonna bring these shadows out just a little bit, okay? Now, as a result, when you do this with highlights and shadows, sometimes your exposure, I adjusted my exposure and I brought it up a little bit. Now it's a little bit too exposed. So I'm bringing it back down to 0. So you can see the before and after. Okay. Now, I don't really deal with vibrance and saturation in Camera Raw. That's just personal preference. I do deal with texture, clarity, and dehaze. But I typically like to do these adjustments first, and then I'll create a separate layer with texture, clarity, and dehaze. Because some people like the color grading aspect, and then they want me to scale back on, oh, it's too much texture, or it's too clear. And I now have a separate layer for that where I can just remove it or scale back on it. So I typically do texture, clarity, and dehaze, you know, at the end. If I decide to use them at all in this sitting, I'll do subtle adjustments. So I probably would go no more than 10 on each one of these. For the sake of time, I will show you what it looks like, you know, right now in this layer. I typically, this particular situation, it's a very rich overall image. It doesn't need much dehazing or clarity. So I'm gonna do 5 on each one of these. I don't mess with curve layers in here. I typically leave those alone. I don't do anything with detail sharpening, noise reduction. I do that on the back end, or I do it like, you know, if I was to do it here, I would create a separate layer for that. I use Color Mixer quite often, and I especially like it because you can adjust hues, saturations, and luminous factors in each one of these. So reds, oranges, yellows, greens, aquas, blues, purples, magentas. It's pretty awesome. I like to open all of them up and play. So again, this is where you can really just kind of experiment and have fun with it. So we'll do something a little bit different from what we did before. I'm gonna amp up the sky, make it a little bit brighter. And you can do that by adjusting the luminous. If you wanna make the skies deeper, you can bring it down here. As far as saturation goes, it's pretty rich in tone. I'm gonna skip out on the saturation. As far as the blues go, let's see what we can get. So I'm gonna take this blue a little bit back. Let's see. Okay, I think I like this blue. It's very simple, subtle adjustment. And then as far as the greens go, I am going to adjust the hues here. I really like adjusting hues because this is where you can get really creative with your stuff. So just by eyeballing it, I think I lean towards cool greens, but we're gonna warm it up a little bit. We're gonna warm up these trees. It's gonna have less greens in it, but again, it's just like a, you know, artistic decision that I just, you know, just feels right for this. As far as saturation goes, let's see. I typically, you know, like to decrease the oranges in the skin. So as you can see, skin does look a little bit orange and red, yellow. So I will take the saturation here and we're gonna take it down to about 15. Let's see if there's reds in her skin. Not too much, so we're gonna just keep that there. I don't have to really change too much. And then I'm going to, we'll actually add some saturation to the sky just for impact. And as you can see, there's a lot of reds, greens, blues, and yellows in this picture. Outside of that, I really don't have to do any other color adjustments because as you can see, there's no magentas or purples in here. So if you want to take it even further or even do different color grading techniques, there's so many different options here. Like I will bounce around because I do get different results from one area to the next. There's also color grading where you can adjust the mid-tone, shadows, and highlights. So, I mean, you can get some pretty cool effects with this. So let's say I want to warm up the shadows. I would bring it over here. In this case, let's see. She's in Miami and I feel like I want this like a cool red undertone to the shadows. So I'm gonna do a subtle adjustment. If you see me bring it over here, that's the direction I'm going in. So we're gonna do a very subtle adjustment. Move it over right here. Let's see, I think that looks good. So as you can see, here's the before, here's the after. And again, these are all things that, you know, it's your aesthetic, like whatever suits you or your client as far as what they're going for. Like the sky's the limit on how many options you can do as far as like color grading. It's infinite options. As far as midtones go, I kind of like this like cool green. But let's see what I like. That's cool. It's a little, I think because there's like green in the background. It's different. I like that. You can change the blending, the balance. I don't do anything with optics. I don't really touch that. I don't touch geometry. Effects, as far as grain goes, I do that on the back end. And then calibration. This is another area that I have a lot of fun in. And so we're gonna play around with this really quick. So again, you know, we just went through everything. You know, did some basic adjustments. I didn't do anything curve wise because we already did that. I did the color mixer. I did the color grading. I'm doing the calibration. So you don't have to use all of these. You can just use one of them. But you know, I just want to share with you like how I do stuff. Because sometimes I will play around with all of them because you'll get pretty cool results. So with these, I'm just going to show you. I mean, it has red primary, green primary, and blue primary. And depending on how you adjust these, it impacts your overall image. So I'm just gonna show you what it looks like when you slide from red primary from this spectrum to the other spectrum. So as you can see, it really has a huge impact. Now, in a case like this, where I actually like how it looks on the blue skies and the trees in the back, but I don't like what it did to her skin, I might do some selective masking and just change the background and keep our skin the same, okay? So in this case, I'm just gonna bring it back. I also wanna see what the greens do. As you can see, it's a little bit more subtle. I do kind of like what it looks like right here. You can also deepen it by the saturation. You can make things more saturated or less saturated. So in this case, I'm kind of liking where I'm going with this. Like I just played around with this real quick just by sliding these back and forth. We're getting some really nice results. So here's the before, here's an after. And the blue primary is probably one of my favorites because this is another place where you can get very rich skin tones. So I'm gonna slide this around. Let me see. So I'm gonna slide the saturation back just a little bit. There you go. So as you can see, here is the colors that we're going for. It has some really cool undertones. As you can see in her skin, it's very subtle, but there's a little bit of green in there. It's so subtle, but it definitely gives it a very unique effect. The skies aren't as saturated. The greens are a little bit more muted, but it gives a really cool effect. So here's the before and here's the after. And we hit okay. And there you go. Last technique, and we'll wrap up shortly, probably the next 10 minutes, sorry, Polly, is I'm gonna create a new layer.
Please do not apologize.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I can go and talk about this like forever.
Yeah, we can talk to you forever.
Yeah, so here is another way that I go about doing color grading on my images, and that's by using presets. Now, presets are essentially once you do something like this and you end up liking your results and you want to save them for future use, you can go ahead and click on these three dots and you can create a preset. Now, I already have a batch of presets that I use. So we are going to go into presets right now. And here are the presets. So Adobe, they actually have a set of their own presets. So as you can see, they have deep skin, medium skin, light skin, retro, black and white. I mean, you can play around with them. And I will say this, that if you were to select food, you could potentially find a cool preset to apply onto your image that is of a subject. So don't limit yourself. If you have their presets, you don't have to just use the ones for subjects. You can play around with it. There might be something in there that would look really amazing on your image. Now I have my own presets. So In this case, we're going to go to Cocoa Utopia. This is one that I kind of dedicated to my melanated queens. It was really important that I had some presets that were available for more of us, more deeper skin tones, medium to deep skin tones. I've seen a lot of presets out there that they offer, you know, one or two for, you know, people with different skin tones from medium to dark, but it's just not a big enough range. So this was my first set. There's more to come, but this one is dedicated to kind of enhancing like chocolate tones. So now that I have these presets, I literally now just go through them and just play around with it. So as you can see, they're very intense. And what you will learn with presets in general, presets, even like the Adobe ones, they'll have some really intense ones that you have to scale back on them. And they do that because there are some images that require more intense color toning than others. So once you find something where you kind of like where it's going, you can scale back once you hit OK and change the opacity down. So I hit Brownie right here. I really like Brownie on her. Here's some of the other ones. Mocha is another fave of mine. I think I'm going to go with Brownie. I think this is very fitting. And as you can see, I mean, it's very deep chocolate rich skin tones. We're gonna hit OK. And I want to scale back on it some. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, 50% doesn't look like much. Let's see what it looks like at 60%. There we go. So now that we're coming to an end, I've shown you guys 3 different like color grading techniques. One is applying presets. So again, here is the before, here's the after. These are using my exclusive presets. This is one where I kind of just played around with some stuff in Camera Raw. Here's a before, here's the before, here's an after. And then this is where I use some color grading techniques straight in here under adjustment layers. And here is the before and here's the after. So again, hold on for 1 second. Here is the one with the adjustments that we did. Here's the Camera Raw ones. And then here is my presets. So I know I covered a lot today, and I'm sorry we went over, but it's definitely something that it takes a little bit more time to, you know, go into depth with. So I hope you guys learned a lot. Do you guys have any questions for me?
This was like truly what you call a master class.
Oh my gosh.
Like master class needs to call you and literally just do this and do it.
I need to practice. I need to do some more practicing, but hopefully this helps.
You are so generous with just your time, your knowledge, your expertise. I see a bunch of thank yous coming in the chat. Stephanie says you just changed the game.
What? Okay, I love it. I love to hear it. Yes.
You know what I really would love to see from those who've listened and those who will listen after this. So if you were watching this recording later, what I'd love to see is people to just like save their like before Jessy J's masterclass, and then save an after you like actually digested all of this information and utilize this. Like show us, tag Jessy, tag me, show us like your post, like what you've applied, and see like how your technique just improves your time you save. This was so great. Okay, I think I just saw a few questions come in. Do you have the time to answer a few questions?
Yeah, I definitely, yeah. Definitely.
And you know what? I'm so glad you mentioned presets, because we were talking about this. So for those who may missed Jessy's intro, She's done an exclusive collection of her own presets. After being asked, countless times, she decided to invest and make her own line of presets. She's also done some work for others, specifically, I should say, Adobe for presets as well. And so you guys got to see the sneak peek. They just went live like a few weeks ago. She has a separate account that you can follow for her presets. And, we were talking about just the excitement about this class and how to keep the momentum after the fact. We'll be doing some giveaways for the bundles of her presets on social. So you will be able maybe to receive some of her bundles that she has made, specifically the ones like she mentioned for like Black skin tones. So stay tuned because that announcement will be going shortly on social soon. So Jessy, I cannot thank you enough. I can't wait to finally meet you.
You guys learned a lot. Sorry, I'm just now seeing this chat, so I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. Since you all have time for a few questions, let's go. I'm just going to go from recent to older. Ari asks, do you feel that Camera Raw gives you more freedom to adjust color than Lightroom?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Lightroom, definitely I use it, especially when it's like on the go stuff because they have the Lightroom app. When I do batch processing of like tons of photos, like if I was to shoot something for a client, let's say like a fast fashion brand that they don't really care about skin retouching too much. They just want like cool color grading. I might batch everything and process it in Lightroom. But when it comes to skin retouching, doing beauty work, doing some of these bigger campaigns, I do go to Photoshop.
Yeah, I did not realize Photoshop could do all this.
Yeah, no, and there's so much more. That's just like a small little piece of like what they offer. It's insane.
Amazing.
I use different techniques every single time. Like I am so fascinated with this, even to this day, that I still touch like every image that goes to my clients. Like I have to add something to it to give it like a little pop or wow factor. And these are the techniques that I use like all the time, every day.
All the time. Straight from his source. Toby asks, do you always color grade after retouching?
Yes. And here's why. Because I have been in situations where I did the color grade and now the client is asking for different color grading. Maybe they're not feeling it. Remember, this is very much of like a whole aesthetic, and like everyone's aesthetic might not be appealing to others or your clients. So I might do a cool effect and I'm all about it and they're not. And now I have to retouch the skin again and then do the color grading. So that's why those smart objects are good too, because they're non-destructive. And that's like a whole nother topic in itself. But I do prefer, and I feel like a lot of photographers prefer skin retouching than color grading if you're going to the lengths that I went, where it's very artistic. It could be, sometimes I go a little extreme with stuff. And to be on the safe side and not have to redo work, that is the best route to take.
Love it. These questions were from before when you were giving us your amazing intro and background, from Destiny asking, how do you scout your locations and how do you balance motherhood and being a photographer and traveling so much for your work? And lastly, do you feel that most of your clients are out of Dallas, being in Dallas?
No, actually. Wow. Okay. I have so much to say about all these. So scouting locations, man, it could be a headache if you're in the wrong city. So I apologize for some of you guys that like don't have access to some of the places that, LA might have or Miami. So when you're in those smaller towns, I highly, highly recommend, I feel like every town has wedding photographers and engagement photographers, and they typically I know this sounds crazy, they typically do a really good job finding locations. So I like to look up local wedding and engagement photographers, and I look up their work, and they typically, you know, they'll have blogs and they'll tag the location. Or I might even put like Dallas wedding photo shoot location, and so much stuff will come up. But if I put up fashion editorial location in Dallas, I might not even find anything. And that's just because there's way more, in my opinion, wedding and family and engagement photographers than people in my line of work that are shooting more beauty and fashion.
That is so genius. Like, you're so
On
right.
that, I found some really cool locations because of that, like really, really awesome ones. Second is peerspace.com. Freaking love Peerspace. They're expanding in a lot of different cities. I feel like even in Dallas, we were limited like last year as far as like locations went. And now we have tons of locations to work with because people are starting to realize that, oh, they can rent out their space for a couple hours for a photo shoot and make money. So a lot of people are now opening up all these venues all over the place so you can rent out their locations for photo shoots and video shoots. Peerspace is probably my number one go-to actually over everything else. Thirdly is with my on location destination shoots where I might have to go out of the country. I'm typically looking up travel like Instagram feeds, or I'm looking up locations on Instagram to see if anyone has tagged pictures from that location so I could see what it looks like. Because what I will tell you is if you look up a location on, even on Instagram, but if you look up a location on Google, you're gonna get this picture perfect, blue waters, clear skies, but then you might go into Instagram, you'll type in that same location and it does not look the same. So I go there because I can see real time what people are tagging. So I can make sure that those picture perfect, like postcard images I see on Google look the same way as it did as someone, you know, just using their iPhone tagging the same location on Instagram. So that helps me out tons. And that's actually saved me headaches because there were some places where I needed like crystal clear waters and they were murky when I looked on Instagram. So like those things really, really do matter. So those are probably like the 3 ways that I look for locations. And then second, there was another question after this. There was the location question. There was something else.
Yeah, so those 2 questions, and then motherhood. How do you balance it all?
I don't sleep. I don't sleep. I'm not even a front. I'm not even a front. Like I don't like. I'm always on the go, and I do make sure that I prioritize my family over everything. Right. So I do make time for my family, and I do have to learn to prioritize like my jobs and realize that not everyone needs everything by tomorrow. They're going to be all right. So what I do in order to have a little bit more balance and I can get a little bit more sleep and spend a little bit more time with my daughter and my family is making sure that I set up expectations with my clients. I get to understand when they need these images by, do they actually need them as soon as possible? Or do they just need them like, you know, within like 2-3 weeks, they'll be fine. You know, because I feel like everyone, when they take photos, yes, they want them tomorrow, but unless there's like an invitation or like a beauty launch or some type of launch that's occurring where there is things that are time sensitive, set up your expectations with the client early on. Like I always let them know, most of my images, your edit's going to come within 2 to 4 weeks. And if you want expedited images, then it's going to cost this amount to expedite your images and put them in front of the line before all my other projects. So I actually make money off of expediting my images to people that do actually need them, you know, ASAP, because maybe they didn't plan, you know, for everything that it takes into selecting the images, editing, retouching, all of that. So yeah, make sure you set up your expectations with your clients so you're not like losing sleep over editing and retouching and, you know, just trying to manage your time. That helps significantly for me. And I try to block out you know, times if I have like a really big beauty campaign, I always ask them, like, when do you need these images by? And I'll block out time around that date. So I make sure that I have time set aside for retouching and for, you know, just making sure I'm getting those images to them. So I might not book photo shoots.
So smart, such helpful and great advice that everyone should be doing. Let's see, there's a few more questions. Where was that question? Nancy asked, do you outsource any parts of what you do?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes it's necessary because I have such a heavy workload. It's just like a, you know, a fashion designer. They're not going to make every dress that they sell to their clients. So I do have to outsource some work, but I actually, the way I do it might be a little bit different from others. So I know a lot of photographers, they might outsource their work and the retoucher has full creative control over everything. I actually don't like them really doing anything. I'm like, fix the skin, don't liquefy, don't do any color adjustments, don't sharpen, don't add grain. I basically don't let them really do anything. I just need them to do quick stuff because I know how to retouch. I retouch very, very well. I know exactly what I need to do. And the good thing about it is that in an event, you know, I have a retoucher that maybe didn't do the job. I'll just do it myself. But you know, fortunately, that hasn't really been the case. But it's very important to know how to retouch first, know how to do your own color grading. I did that for a long, long time. I touch every image that goes out. Anything you guys see, I've touched it to this day because I have to make sure it's right. I don't know. I think that's like the Virgo in me. I'm just like very like
No, but
particular.
that's why I literally have that Jessy J touch. I know what your photos are.
Right.
But a lot
So
of bigger photographers do outsource retouching, and that's totally fine. That works.
yeah, yeah. And so I've had my experience with different retouchers, and you know, if you don't like tell them what you like and don't like, they'll take full creative control and sometimes can destroy your image. So I would tread lightly with it because there's some really incredible retouchers out there, but those are the ones that take direction very, very well. And understand that they can't just do whatever they want to the photo. There's a limit for sure. So just make sure that you know you're setting guidelines as far as like what you need from them. For me, when I do use them, like I don't use them all the time, but when I do need them because I have so much work going on, which is always a good problem to have. Um, I don't really have them do anything. Stuff like, oh, fix the skin real quick, fix this, fix the hair. I hate retouching hair. I'll do it, but I mean, hair retouching is probably the most difficult thing to retouch, as some of you guys probably already know. And then let me do the rest. Don't touch nothing else. I don't even like liquefied. Um, that's probably like my biggest thing is do not liquefy any of my subjects. They're beautiful as is. And if my client requests that they're want to be liquefied or you know have something adjusted, that they'll tell me. I try to avoid using it, especially now, just in a day and age where everyone really does want to like showcase their natural beauty. I think like I said before, 10 years ago it was a lot of striving to have this picture perfect image, and that's really not the case anymore, thank God. I love the direction that retouching is going. So
Love that. The last question I'll take is from Ari. What does your process look like when planning / executing your own creative concepts?
oh yeah, no. So I love Pinterest. Like it's my favorite. I have probably 200 mood boards saved. Like I'm not even joking. It's insane. Um, but I constantly just go through there and I, you know, batch like images together based off different concepts that I may or may not do in the future. I don't know if I'll hit all of them, but it's Pinterest is kind of like my wish list of things that I strive to, you know, go after and make happen. So some of those I'll revisit and I'll be like, oh man, I haven't done anything like that. Let's try to recreate it. Now, what I will say is in my creative process, I'm really big, and I think this is very important for all you guys to understand that creating these mood boards and coming up with concepts, it's important that you're not taking an image and wanting to basically do the exact same image as what you just saw. It's literally pulling inspiration and that's it. And I might pull a photo that I liked because I just liked the lighting in it. Like I didn't even care about anything else going on in the image. I'm like, oh, that lighting's cool. But maybe I didn't care for the makeup, the fashion, the overall like aesthetic of it, but I really like the lighting. So now when I create mood boards, I do take extra time than what probably the average person takes. I'm very particular, so I'll have a mood board. I will have my concept, but then I'll have a mood board for the makeup artist. I'll have a mood board for the hairstylist. I will have a lighting reference mood board. I will have a color grading mood board. I will also have a fashion mood board. I will have a location mood board. So I know this sounds crazy, but I will have 5+ mood boards created within a concept. So when we all come together, each person, they have their own mood board to work with and nothing's overlapping. And something that I would like to share with you guys is if you are ever sent a mood board, always get to the bottom of why they sent that photo to you and what they are attracted to in that image. Because I am very, very visual and I might get someone to send me a photo and they're like, we want to do this. And then come to find out, they only like that image because of the outfit that they were wearing. They didn't care about the hair, they didn't care about the lighting, the makeup. So I might recreate something similar to it, similar lighting, an overall aesthetic. And they're like, no, we wanted actually something else. We really just like the outfit. I was like, okay. So that's why it's very important to get to the bottom of what your clients are drawn to. If they ever have mood boards that they create for you, I have some that do that often. And then I have some that they don't have any direction. So it's very important to kind of decipher why you pull different images when you are creating and building a concept.
So smart. And especially
and a lot of my big, like, my big clients, like when it comes to beauty brands and smaller brands, they do the same thing. So it is something that they do for the teams. So everyone knows what direction to take.
No, I think that is so smart because a lot of people do not know what they want. They're asking you for that.
Yep.
So, you mentioned how, clients have you on their mood boards, as they should. If they come to you, they do not. Do you tell them, hey, which photos of my work that, you like? What are you referencing here from my work?
I'm always asking questions to get to the bottom of what is it that you guys need. Because I'll tell you at the end of the day, when you are on set with these big productions and there's a lot of money being spent, there's no time to figure those things out, the day of the shoot. So I'm always asking, even when I'm at it on a mood board, it's like, what are we pulling from here? What's the reason for this? And I think a big thing that you guys need to do if you guys are, coming up with concepts, especially with ones where it is maybe a true campaign where there's a lot of money being invested in it, is having at least like 2 to 3 lead up calls prior to the shoot day. Because you can work out a lot of stuff just by going through the mood board together and everyone's asking questions.
Such great advice. I mean, again, I can't thank you enough because this was beyond what I could have asked for.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to hear that. Wow.
Just show us 1 or 2 edits and
That feels so good. Thank you. You guys, thank you so much for having me. It really means a lot. I hope we were able to answer as many questions as we could. Yeah, this has been a blessing. I'm so happy to be a part of this awesome community of amazing women. I definitely feel like there's so much for the world to see from us. And it's just getting started, but yeah, kick ass out there. Definitely show some love, send me a DM, let's connect. If you guys are ever in Dallas, let me know. I would love to meet up with you guys. But yeah, thank you for taking your time out and being patient and, just supporting us.
Ari says, I'm doing it right now as we speak. I'm applying the gems. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
Cheers.
Jessy. I
It
can't
means a
live.
lot.
Thank you everyone for listening. Bye everyone.
Bye, everyone.